Hi, on behalf of everyone at First Care Women's Clinic, I want to thank you for watching this video tonight and being part of this very important fundraiser. I'm here at the First Care Women's Clinic Memorial Rose Garden, located at Grace Community Church. Most of you didn't even know we had a rose garden, and probably very few of you have actually been here. This rose garden commemorates unborn children lost to abortion. It's here for their mothers. Like we go to grave sites for our loved ones, mothers can come here to memorialize and remember the lives of their children that they lost from abortion. There's plaques in the rose garden, and each mother is able to put something on a plaque that can be put on one of the posts. Sometimes they write scriptures, and sometimes they write a little message to their child. But in the over 20 years that I've been working with post-abortion women, the one thing that they all have in common is that they said that they get a sense from God of whether or not their child was a boy or a girl, and they named them accordingly. I just find that so incredibly interesting. The video that you're about to watch also remembers unborn children and recognizes their humanity, even though they were lost to abortion. The video is about an abortionist named Gosnell. He was also a serial killer. And the things that you're going to hear and see that he did are horrific. They're absolute evil. But I believe by the end of this video that as you compare what he did with what is done in legal abortion clinics that are considered reputable, you will see very little difference, because abortion is horrible and it is evil. I want to thank you for supporting this ministry by being here, and I pray that you support us in a big way, because we want to save the unborn so that these children's names are not on plaques in this Memorial Rose Garden. They'll be on report cards and birth certificates, birthday party invitations, and wedding announcements. On behalf of these unborn children, I pray that you realize that every cent you give saves lives. God bless you. I'm here today with Maya and Devon. And Maya, you came here last year sometime, right?
Yes.
And at that time, you were already 11 weeks.
11 weeks.
Is that right?
Yeah. I didn't know that at the time. I just took a pregnancy test, so I came here to confirm the pregnancy, and I was considering abortion. I felt like I wasn't ready first. I was 23 years old. I'm 24 now. Felt like my finances weren't right. I wasn't with the father at the time. We were on and off.
We were living together though.
Yeah.
But we were having we had relations, but we were just having relationship problems.
I felt like God brought me here because, I don't know, it seems like when you ask for an abortion, it's kind of just like, yep, okay, let's set it up, you know. And the lady that was speaking to me, she just took me by myself and was just asking what's going on, and if that I was really considering abortion, that there's so many other options to still give her a chance. And so then we did the ultrasound, and I heard her heartbeat, and I just started bawling my eyes out that I was even considering, aborting her.
And Devon, you were in the room when they did the ultrasound.
Yes, I was. It was
How
amazing.
did that make you feel?
It was crazy. It was like a surreal moment because, you kind of sitting there thinking kind of how it happened, it wasn't planned. You know what I'm saying? So kind of when you see it and then you actually see the baby and the baby is formed and stuff like that, it brings in new emotions and stuff like that. Like, man, that's a real living human being born on the inside of this woman. You know what I'm saying? And it took me by surprise just knowing how it actually really was. You know what I'm saying? So I was just in awe, shocked. Happy, but I was shocked.
It felt so selfish that I would consider aborting her just because of the situations I kind of, put myself in. So it was like, oh, it's convenient for me not to have her. And that wasn't fair. And I'm just thankful to God that I was brought here, and The process it wasn't rushed or anything. Like, they were really taking their time, like just talking to me.
You have to live with the decision to have the baby, or to ultimately you decide, oh, this baby's not going to come into this world. And I just don't feel like we have that power, especially when we in particular have made the decision to have relations with each other.
But you have since married. When did you do that?
New Year's.
New Year's.
Yep.
Wonderful. And you are both Christians.
Yes.
I think that's really important for people to realize, because a lot of people think that abortions happen outside of the Christian church, and Christians just don't do that. But even Christians get themselves in situations where they're in crisis, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, can we see this precious baby?
Oh, yes, you can.
Oh, she's beautiful.
I'll get you a little pacifier for a second.
Right.
And tell everybody her name.
Her name is Layla Ray.
I
Layla
think her
Ray
daddy
Mitchell.
loves Layla, don't you?
I do love Layla.
Yes.
I do.
She is beautiful.
Yeah, I'm just blessed every time I see her. I couldn't imagine. Like, that would have been the worst decision ever.
So we are welcome a guest into the lair. This is your first venture into the lair, Lori?
It's actually the first time I've had headphones on,
Yeah.
in a podcast. Yes.
Yeah, you look very well.
Yes, I
You-
think I wear it well.
You wear it well.
Yeah, you look the part.
So Lori watches Unashamed podcast, and we have Lisa off camera as well. These guys are with First Care Women's Clinic, which is in Georgia, outside Atlanta, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right outside Atlanta.
And so I guess, Lori, the reason you're here is because you watched a podcast where we had Anna Phelim on with Dad and I. And as part of our discussion of just me explaining how we met and our relationship and how it's grown, because one of the first projects that we worked on was the Gosnell project with you guys. I mean, a part of your book. And so, I was fascinated by these guys. And so they came to Louisiana, were on the podcast. And then you happened to see that podcast and thought, man, during COVID and we're trying to figure out how to speak to our supporters and all that, what if we just did a podcast, style discussion? So that's kind of where this came from, right?
Yes, it is.
And it brought you here to Louisiana. Tell the folks a little bit about what you guys do and the clinic and
Well,
that
we're
type
in
of thing.
Georgia. Georgia's a real high abortion state in the country, very high. Some people wouldn't expect it because it's in the South and there's a lot of churches and strong Christian faith, but it's extremely high, and that has a lot to do with Atlanta. And we are, 51% of all the residents in Georgia who abort live in 4 counties out of 159 counties in Georgia, and we are one of those counties. So we're on the front line, and we butt up against the county, Fulton County, which is Atlanta. So we see a lot of Fulton people as well. So we see a lot of abortion-minded women. We're one of the busiest and largest centers in the state of Georgia, and we have a Planned Parenthood right up the street from us. I mean, you can walk right there, and they do abortions. So we're right on that front line. And because of that, we have to be a top-notch pregnancy center.
Right.
Because what draws women are services, not to sit down and talk to somebody about why I should not have an abortion. That is not what draws women to a pregnancy center. They come for services. So we try to be a top-notch, and now our budget is well over $1 million and growing. And so every year we have, we get support throughout the year, and we have the best supporters ever. We have people that are just amazing, and they're going to be watching this taping. So I just want to tell them I love them and I appreciate them. But we have 2 fundraisers. One is the big fundraiser in the spring, and last year we had planned it all out. We had it all down, and COVID hit, and we scrambled, and we did this really low key taped thing. Somebody did it in their basement. I'm sitting at my desk. You know, it was very low key. But our supporters gave anyway, in a big way. As a matter of fact, they gave throughout the whole year. So as we were preparing for 2021, and I had seen the podcast, I go, I want them there. I want them to come. And we have this big venue, and I pictured you all coming at the venue. I've had several groups that have come up in like a panel form. We've done that before.
Right.
So I was real excited about that. And then, you know, we still weren't able to meet face to face.
Yeah.
And then this great idea, why don't I go there? So I sacrificed a lot and I came here. But I just think the reason it's so important to me is because as I saw this, I had been following the trial of Gosnell, and there was just hardly anything you could find on it. And I really believe what I had read made me think he was not going to be convicted. And then he was. And I was real thankful about that. But you answered so many things for me. I found what your story was so compelling. They're the authors of Gosnell, and they also produced the movie, Gosnell. I had seen the movie, but I had not read the book. I have read the book since. And I want to get this book to everyone that is getting people together to watch this taping as part of our fundraiser.
Right.
So I just want to tell you, it was extremely compelling. We have savvy donors, people who want to know, they want to know what's going on. And I always try to educate them during our fundraising event. And I just think they're going to love to hear what you have to say. But I wanted just to tell you something that really hit me in your preface. This really got me. I am absolutely certain that the dead babies spoken of in our court were unique people whom the world will now never know. I hope this book and the movie go some way to mark the fact that they lived and in their short lives made a difference. Time will tell. This story can change hearts and mine. It has changed mine. And
even listening to you reading that, it brings tears to my eyes. You know,
I liked you immediately. I just couldn't.
It's amazing the power of that book and that story I don't know. There's so many thoughts I have when you just read that piece there. That's a long time since I've read that. The power of the book and the power of the story is in those individual children that change the whole world.
Exactly.
And particularly baby boy A, who's at the very center of the story and who's very much featured, I suppose, in the movie in a sense. And he, was born and died on the same day. And it's just so happens it's the same day as my father's birthday, which I just think is bizarre, right? You know, and there was a lot of stuff like that happened through doing this story. And he was a very big child. He was the child that Gosnell joked about. This baby is big enough to walk me to the bus stop. Yeah. And the baby was born alive, and because that was the method that Gosnell used. He wasn't an OBGYN, so he filled people up with Cytotec, and they basically dilated, and the babies fell out. And this baby was put into a Tupperware container, and and they asked people during the trial, and of course this brings up the whole issue that the trial then, that this wasn't, front page news all around the world, but they had an expert there. First of all, they had somebody there who had witnessed it, and they said, well, what did he do? Like, what did the baby do? And Karima Cross, they asked her, and she stood up, and she did this, and she curled herself up in the way that this baby had curled himself up. And then they asked a neonatologist, an expert in children of that age, what's it like? What are those preemies like? And that expert said, well, they hate, if you were in a proper setting, if you were going to take care of a baby like that, they like the dark or light, because the light hurts their eyes, and they're cold. And of course, in Gosnell's clinic, he got none of those respects, and he was just thrown into this Tupperware container, and he was so big that his legs came out over the side of it. There's photographs on the internet for all time, But he had such an impact on Adrian Moten, who was one of the workers there, that she took a photograph. And she took a photograph. The child, was then killed, a period later. His neck was cut like all the others. But she kept the phone. And when the cops caught up with her eventually...
She kept it for years.
She kept it for years. And Jim Wood was the cop who caught up with her and, came to her door. And she was always thinking someone's going to eventually come here.
Yeah.
And And she said, hang on a minute. And she kind of went in the back and she, you know, the way you have a mobile phone, you get an old one, you get a new one, you know, you throw the old ones out. She held on to it and she handed it to him and she said, there's something here you're going to want. And they had to send that phone to Quantico to retrieve the image of baby boy A, which then became a very centralised image, which was projected in front of that jury. But she said, now I'm free.
Wow.
Like, that's what she said when she gave over the phone. And I said to her, you know, I was on the phone and I was like saying to her, you know, God, what was it like to be arrested? It must be awful. And she said, I wasn't arrested. I was rescued.
Wow.
And her life has really turned around. But I mean, her and Cream Across and a number of other people who saw that baby, he had, and Phelim makes a really eloquent point about this, where he says that you could live a very long life and not do anything consequential, you know, not consequential, right?
Yeah.
You could do lots of really important stuff, but nothing really, really consequential. And this child who lived a number of hours could change the whole world and has changed people already, and we know that.
Right.
Your Honor, may the Commonwealth publish the exhibit to the jury?
You may publish.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is the photograph that Betty Goodwin took of baby boy A on the night of July 12th.
What I'd like for you to do is talk about how you came to write this book and do this movie and the trial and everything.
Because that was fascinating.
We made a documentary about fracking, which people know, and a lot of fracking goes on in Pennsylvania. So I was there promoting the film, showing the film, and I had a day off in Philadelphia. And as a journalist, of course, I'm an Irish person who doesn't drink alcohol, so I couldn't go to the pub. So as a journalist, you open the paper and you look at what interesting court cases are on, because that's my holiday. I go down and sit in the court and listen to interesting court cases. So there was this local case, a doctor accused of murdering babies and murdering two patients in an abortion clinic, and the babies were born alive and he would kill them. And I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was just a little note in the paper. So I went down, and there, I mean, I walked into the courtroom, and I've been in a lot of courtrooms. I've covered the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I've like the worst you could talk about. And there, I was sitting in the courtroom, and just where Alan was Gosnell, America's biggest serial killer, sitting there. I could listen to the evidence of this Karima Cross, I think it was, who was just telling me the most amazing stuff, amazing in a journalistic way, but just my eyes. But the most shocking thing was behind me was they'd chosen a bigger courtroom, the biggest courtroom in Philadelphia, because there was going to be so much media there. And I turned around, and it was row after row after row of empty seats. And I was there for a couple of days, and I came back to LA, and I said to Anne, we've got to do this story. This is an amazing story. And Anne says, no, we don't do abortion.
No,
we
don't want anything to do with that.
Don't want anything to do with that. And I says, okay. And so I ordered the transcripts. You can order the transcripts from the transcriber, right? And I got to know her, and I ordered them and I paid for them and gave them to Anne. Says, read that. And she read it. And 2 or 3 days later, her and Magda, who worked with us, came back and says, okay, we're doing this now.
And I remember actually it was coming up to Christmas or something, and I think we went to Ireland, and we were in Ireland for Christmas, and it was all we talked about the whole time.
So tell us about Gosnell, the whole situation, that what he was doing, and basically how he got caught and what's happened to him since.
Well, Kermit Gosnell was an abortion doctor working out of West Philadelphia for decades. He wasn't an OBGYN, he was a regular doctor. He was a doctor. And I think he kind of quickly worked out that he could make a lot of money, doing this and offering abortions at any stage. He ran a filthy clinic, disgusting clinic, and he employed people who were not nurses. They weren't, nurses is like, they weren't, these are people who hadn't finished 7th grade. They hadn't done 7th grade. Most of them had drug and alcohol problems, had multiple abortions, had been abused in some way. These were broken people. According to to Jim Wood, like these are, he said of 2 of them, he said, you wouldn't let them mow your lawn, let alone give people anesthesia. The chief anesthesiologist in the building was a 15-year-old. And because of her, more people didn't die because she took it very, very seriously, and she got 20 minutes training. And if you went into the place, and of course this is kind of the crux of the matter in some ways, if you went in, there was cat feces all about. There was a stench, a really bad stench of death because of the fact that he had fallen out with the disposal company. And he was storing bodies everywhere, including where people were having their peanut butter and jello sandwiches, like in the regular kitchen that was being used by the staff. There's so many awful things about this. One of the more awful things is, and I think we mentioned earlier, like two women died. Samika Shaw, who was a young African-American mother, and Karnamaya Monger, who was a Bhutanese refugee who had lived in a refugee camp for 20 years. Those 2 women had died, and the people working at the Department of Health in Pennsylvania did not leave their seat in their nice, comfortable offices to investigate the deaths of those 2 women. It's even like that's for me, and I've spoken in Harrisburg, exactly where those people and I just think I have no real proper words. I'm full of anger for them, and I have to look for forgiveness for that one, Phil. But I am full of anger for people who have those, my mother and father used to call it pensionable jobs, those good pensionable jobs, those beautiful pensionable jobs. And when they were, and they were working for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and they couldn't be bothered to check out what happened to these very vulnerable women from populations that they're supposed to care about. So for 17 years. The clinic was never inspected. No one walked across the threshold in 17 years. And a lot of that is to do with the governor of Pennsylvania, who was Governor Ridge, a Catholic. I would want to put Catholic first, by the way, Republican after that. But Catholic is the most obscene part of that. And he actually, when he ran on a pro-abortion ticket and basically said once he got in office, hands off those abortion clinics. So they stopped examining them. And if it wasn't for Jim Wood, the reason the detective, if it wasn't for the detective Jim Wood, this thing would never have come to light. And the only reason it came to light was that Kermit Gosnell also had a very lucrative business selling opioids. He was in fact like the 3rd largest opioid seller in the whole of Pennsylvania. So you could go there and you could buy like a whole book of prescriptions, right, that you could then sell on. And that's how he got caught, because Jim Wood went in there to investigate that, and then it was like, what is going on here? He was, first of all, the stench was terrible. Then and it's filmed. He filmed it. They filmed it as they walked in to do the raid on the clinic, and they open up like this, this big sort of cabinet and find this place where Kermit Gosnell cut the feet off the babies and kept them in jars as a collector's item. Like he was, your typical.
He was a genuine serial killer.
Your typical serial killer. And they're like, Jim is like, Detective Jim Wood, he's like looking at it going, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. What is going on here? And he's like, well, I've never been in an abortion clinic before, so I don't really know. Maybe that's normal? It's not. It's not at all normal. And not alone did they find the feet of children, they also found babies themselves, like lots of them, all over the place. And in the end, there was 49 bodies were taken out of that clinic from that raid.
What is this, the lunchroom?
Lunchroom? I'm good. No lunch for me. Hey, Woody? Hey, man, you gotta see this. Hold up. Why?
Hey, man, is this normal?
I don't know. I've never been in an abortion clinic before.
And the fact that the media, the world's media, wasn't there for so many reasons, including, you know, the fact that, as Phelim says, two minority women who had died there, but also
comfort care. There was one scene in the movie that made us really want to make the movie. So they had to distinguish between illegal abortions and good abortions. And if anyone's listening to this without video, I'm doing quotes. I'm not saying good. I mean in terms of the prosecution.
Legal abortion.
Right? So they brought in a legal abortion doctor, and the first thing was, so the jury saw all these pictures and heard all this incredible evidence, kept quiet the whole trial. So they asked the abortion doctor, how many abortions have you done
in your career
to establish her credentials? And she said 40,000. Right? And that's the noise the jury made.
They gasped.
The jury gasped, right? It was the only time they gasped in the whole trial. Even
40,000.
40,000. One person.
doctor.
One person.
Yeah.
One person.
Can you imagine?
So when we did the movie, we changed the total to 30,000 because we thought no one would believe 40,000.
We actually changed it.
So it's one of the few things, rather than normally in movies you're over dramatizing them, we thought we better play this down because no one will believe 40,000.
Romans 13, love does no harm to its neighbor. Ever. You say, I think at the root of all this, we have a severe shortage of love for each other.
Yeah.
The greatest commands in the Bible, love God and love your neighbor. I don't see the downside to that.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of evil full of hatred to slaughter your own child.
They just compartmentalize. That's what this person did. They just shut
40,000.
They just shut off in their minds. Once you get to 400, what's 40,000?
Funny, that's very interesting. I was asking someone, how do you get someone into the abortion industry, right? Young, and they say they get medical students and they pay them money.
I was going to say, it's
and
very
once
lucrative.
once you do one, you see, and you start off with the smallest abortions, you know, the young, and it doesn't look like that, and then they promote them, but once you're in the system, then you have to keep defending it to yourself. But this doctor then was asked, what happens if a baby is born alive? And she got really angry, and then and said, well, we give it comfort care. And the process, what's comfort care? We keep the baby warm, set it aside, eventually it will pass.
So starve it to death, basically.
Starve it to death.
Or
And that's
dehydrated to
and
death.
that's what Governor Northam was talking about
Correct.
in Virginia. And when I heard that evidence, I was going, the world doesn't know about comfort care. The world needs to know about comfort care, and then they need to ask, is this the kind of world we want to live in? But we need to tell people this is a genuine...
It's the reason why we made this particular scene in the movie, and I think we will show this scene in the movie right now. But this scene in the movie is the reason, the whole reason why we made the film, because we thought I've never heard anything like this before, and this is directly from the transcripts of the trial.
Dr. North, how many abortions would you say you've performed in your career?
I have performed over 30,000 abortions.
Have you ever had a live birth during an abortion attempt, Doctor?
No, I have not, because we listened to the sonogram to ensure that the fetal heart has stopped.
Well, what if you made a mistake?
We don't.
Well, what if you did?
Objection. Hypothetical, Your Honor.
Your Honor, she's a medical expert. I'd like to have her opinion.
Overruled. I'm going to allow the question, but stay on point, Counselor.
What would you do if the baby was out and it was breathing?
We would issue comfort care.
Comfort care. Can you define that for us?
That's keeping the fetus warm and comfortable. Eventually, it will pass.
Eventually, it would pass. So basically, you'd let it die.
he was actually he was supposed to be using this injection into the heart that would stop the heart. The
Yes.
baby would be dead, and the baby would be born dead.
Yeah.
But he missed a lot, and then
Yes.
a lot of people, said that he did. The babies were born alive.
Yeah, no, they were.
And he would take these living children, and he would puncture the base of their neck.
Yes.
And he would sever their spinal cord.
Yes.
And
That's
the
how he
connection
killed them.
to the brain.
That's how he killed them.
Yeah.
And so, killing a child after birth is infanticide.
Correct.
And that was illegal. But and they had to prove in court
Yes.
that those children were alive when he
Yes.
did that.
But there were plenty of witnesses who testified and said they saw these children moving. In the end, he's in prison for killing 3 children. There was 3 individual cases that were very specific.
The grand jury wanted to indict him for hundreds. Let's just say the police establishment and the law enforcement establishment wouldn't have let them do that because it would spike their homicide statistics.
I read that.
Where everyone's going, oh, we've reduced
Gives you a
violent
bad
crime.
name.
We've reduced violent crime by so much, 10% last year, and then suddenly they didn't want this massive
That is
increase. So politics still got involved.
So wound up being what, 7? How many?
He was charged with 7.
Right.
But he ended up
It's very difficult.
homicide on 3.
It's very difficult to prove that someone was alive, especially these babies were frozen and then deep thawed, and so this was new forensic science.
Eventually, as I said, he did get convicted. He is in prison. We have been to the prison. We've met him, spent 3 hours with him in a prison, and he's.
Can I just say he sat opposite Anne in the prison. The prison isn't through plastic perspex. It's the table. It's like a coffee table, and he sat opposite Anne and kept putting his hand on her knee all during the interview and kept apologizing. And I'm going, if you're really sorry, you'd stop it.
That was creepy, wasn't it?
That was
you know what? It
This
was like the least creepy part of the whole thing.
Really?
Biblically speaking, I mean, can we receive the blessings of God as long as a people, we continue to sacrifice our children,
If and until America turns from this heinous crime, unless they do that, God is never going to bless this nation.
That's right. We're always gonna...
You can go all the way back to the oldest empires that there were, 4,000 BC, Mesopotamia, and all these empires. Every empire there has ever been has, in fact, collapsed under the weight of things they do like this right here.
Sin.
Yeah.
At the moment, unfortunately, there's so many good people who don't know what abortion is, and I think we were one of those people too. By the way, how did we get to almost middle age? Let's say, without knowing what abortion was really.
Well, I think that's intentional. I think that's very intentional on Planned Parenthood's part. And they use all these euphemisms. And I'm like, what are you doing with the euphemisms? Stop with it's abortion. Keep on calling it that. It's not a procedure. It's not a termination. None of that. Stop that. It's abortion. What are you shy about? Just call it what it is.
I have a text. I read
Somehow I knew you would have.
I was
text.
hoping you would. I was hoping he was. I was watching him there.
Laurie knows, Dad. He can get the text.
I was thinking about this last night on the slaughter of unborn children, and it reminded me of something similar to this, the kind of mind that does these things. The God of, this is in Acts chapter 3, about verse 15. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of our fathers, has glorified his son, his servant, Jesus. You handed him over to be killed, and you disowned him. You disowned him. So these people that handed Jesus and cried out, crucify him, you disowned him before Pilate, though he had decided to let him go. You disowned the holy and righteous one and asked that a murderer be released to you. You killed the author of life. So we're not too far from the same concept.
Right.
You have children at their age inside their mother's womb who have not come close to any kind of sinful behavior. They are pure. They're safe, they're pure, and to disown them, I looked up disown, to refuse to acknowledge, to repudiate, to cast off. That's what they did to Jesus, the Son of God, the author of life. And you say, if you're brutal enough to slaughter the author of the living, Jesus Christ, there's nothing you won't do. So I've just looked at it from a biblical standpoint, to repudiate a child in your womb, your child, to disown him.
Right.
What the apostles were saying is, you disown someone when you say, kill him, kill him, kill him. Here's a mistake-free God. Never made a mistake. Nothing. You say, well, surely you can't hold anything against him. They slaughtered him. Mm-hmm. That kind of mind will slaughter their offspring. So I have a question. Is it, in the Old Testament, it seems that immoral conduct was the fuel of killing their own children. They were so immoral. A lot of sexual activity brings forth offspring.
Right.
And they were so immoral, like we are today. Nothing has changed. The immorality rate is so high that there's these children. So what are we going to do with it? They're viewed, instead of as a gift given one from God, they're viewed as a burden and something that needs to be eradicated, repudiated, and disowned. So they just had have a wall up. They're the ones who were sexually active enough to begin with,
right?
And they say, well, what am I going to do with this? It's the kid's a burden. Will be a burden to me. So they just slaughter them. That's about as calloused and as mean-spirited. It has to be from the devil himself. It has to be satanic. I can't think of anything more brutal than that. I would just say, at least the women can know they can be forgiven.
Well, that's, I was
They can be
thinking of that.
forgiven.
Important to
When
say that,
Jesus
yeah.
was on the
What
cross.
a dastardly way to treat another person.
It's terrible.
Your own
When
child.
Jesus was on the cross, he said about those people, Father, forgive them, for they know
That's
not what
correct.
they do. And
Yeah.
and I think that there's so many women who have been lied to. They're just
Yes.
deceived. They feel that these babies are not really babies. They're not real, and they want to deny the humanity of their children. And they're being told that there's no humanity to them.
right.
I think
So-
I think it's important to say that, and I become more conscious of this every time. This is increasingly become something, an obsession of mine, is to really, for us all to acknowledge that people listening to us right now have have done this.
That is correct.
And
I've studied with many women. I said, girl, all I can tell you is you can be forgiven.
yes,
You can be
and
forgiven.
it's so. I think that's incredibly important
You
to say
betcha.
that, because
It
and I think
almost haunts them when you're discussing it.
It's horrific. I mean, we just had a recent example of it ourselves. With someone who told us this, her own story, and I mean, I thought I was going to throw up when she told it. I mean, it's such a shocker, you know. But I actually think almost, and I don't know what you think about this, Phil, but it's like, I think one of the worst punishments is living with it. You know,
Yeah.
and so people maybe, I think some of the people here who are listening, some of your great supporters could be those people, and I think Phil will say it much better than me, but I think Jesus has forgiveness for those people, right? He's full of forgiveness.
Yeah.
But people have to ask for forgiveness, I suppose, you know.
Well,
But it's a burden. They're living with this, and it's awful
So
for them.
part of the reason Lisa and I have been so active in the pro-life movement and speak on behalf of a lot of pregnancy centers like yours to help raise funds, since the other side has government funding and all these people pouring money into it. So really, I mean, you guys are the front line of the whole
We
battle.
are.
Everything. And but Lisa had an abortion, at 16, and before she and I got together, and same thing. Her parents concluded that it was inconvenient, and it's not a real baby. And this is back in the early 80s, not too long after Roe v. Wade, and so we didn't know much about, you have all the equipment we have now to look inside. And so she bought the lie. And so when she speaks to women, she speaks as a woman who's been there.
Yeah.
And she tells about the 3 lies they told her that day, and one of them was that you'll never have to, think about this again the rest of your life. You'll be able to go forward, and it'll be great. And she says, I've thought about it for 36 years. I can never not think about it. But she said a few years ago when she embraced Christ, she realized that he had the ability to take away shame. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'll always regret the decision I made, but I'm going to see that my child again. Mm-hmm. And that's the hope of Christians. And so I think you guys do, I'm sure most groups do post-abortive counseling, which is very helpful,
We do.
to women.
I was going to say to Ann, what you said, don't you think that sometimes when I watch pro-abortion women, feminist women, and they're marching and everything, and it's all about abortion now, by the way. It used to be about women's equal rights, equal pay. It's all about abortion now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they won't let pro-life people in, but anybody else is okay. But I look at them and I think, they're probably post-abortion, either because if you've had an abortion and you realize or you accept that what you did was bad, it's real bad. And you just can't go there. You just can't go there. So you will fight it, and you will actually fight for the right to abort, just because if you don't, that means you killed somebody, and it's too painful. But we do have post-abortion recovery, and what I love about it is we have people that come in who are still very sexually active, still living a lifestyle, have had abortions, and they come in, and then we have people from the church. So we have church women coming together with these women, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think the biggest change has been, just in the pro-life movement in general, is it's much more pro-love now. And before, we were, the people on our side were the angry people and the signs, and it seemed like harassing women into trying to make better choices, instead of saying, look, we want to tell you what this is about. We want to show you your child. And the other thing, I think technology has been our greatest ally, as we now can see more and more inside the womb.
The ultrasound,
has really been a
4D,
benefit
3D.
and a blessing. So what you guys do, because what is it? I mean, it's not 100%, but it's almost 100%, right? Once a woman actually sees that child.
It's remarkable because they really believe the child is nothing.
Right.
They really believe they're not going to see anything.
Right.
But I can tell you, I've stood in the room when we were doing an ultrasound, and these babies, it's like God just has them show out. They wave, and we have this one picture.
Oh, that's great.
Oh my gosh, you should see it. The baby's hand is like this, and it's just beautiful.
Oh my God.
Just beautiful. But to see that and hear this woman, she looks away, and she doesn't want to see. She goes, "Don't show me that. Don't show me that." And she's crying, and we're talking to her, and I remember this one particular one where I couldn't reach this woman for days. And she finally did call me, and she says, "I need to see that again." She said, "I made an appointment for an abortion after seeing this ultrasound, but if I could see it again, maybe." And she ended up coming and having the ultrasound. But it's hard to watch and stand there and find out that baby was aborted.
It's funny. So I think I mentioned to you yesterday that I watched a pro-abortion movie, a HBO movie the other day called Unpregnant. And, and she goes to this Planned Parenthood clinic, and, they have to do some kind of they do some kind of an exam on her at some stage. And she's lying on a bed, and the woman says to her, you don't have to look at the monitor. And I thought, I'd say they might even say a little bit more than that. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting. Why not? Isn't information a good thing, But it makes me think about this one woman who went to Gosnell's clinic, and it's in the midst of the whole Gosnell thing, it's so important to find if there's anything good you want to chase after that, and there were these good stories, wonderful stories, including obviously the police officer Jim Wood, who's just a rock star and my friend forever.
I can tell you liked him.
Oh yeah. No, as I said to him, unfortunately we're family now, but this one woman, she, because they had a grand jury process, because when this case, emerged and it was discovered, it was such a mess of information, and people were like, I don't even know what's legal and what's not legal here. So they had a grand jury, and they brought in lots of witnesses to say what they'd seen and what had happened. And then they brought in this one woman and was like, well, what happened to you? And so she described that she had gone for an abortion to Gosnell's clinic, and she was very pregnant. And, for some reason, when she was there being examined by him, she kind of started to acknowledge her pregnancy in a way that she hadn't before. Because I think people do this kind of denial thing. And so she started asking him sort of very specific questions about what would happen to the baby afterwards. And she said, what happens to the babies afterwards? And he said, well, we burn them. And then she was kind of, and she was super pregnant. I mean, she was very pregnant. And he did abortions at any stage. And the process was that you'd receive this cytotech, this thing to dilate today, and then more of it tomorrow, and then on the third day, if you were very pregnant, you'd eventually give birth to the baby. Was what he did. She went home and spoke to her cousin and said, started a conversation with the cousin, and then in the grand jury, Christine Wexler said to her, "What happened then?" And she went, "Oh, my baby started kindergarten today."
Yeah.
And the grand jury, and we didn't do it in the movie actually, it was for a dramatic reason, but the truth of what actually happened was that the grand jury stood up and applauded for the first time in anyone's memory ever. And the reason was
grand jury is all
a grand jury,
official
but they're there with they're ordinary people. It was women with their knitting there. It was ordinary people who, retired people and teachers and all kinds of people were there in that grand jury room. But they had heard for a year the most demonic stories, the most horrific stories you've ever, and suddenly they had something amazing. Yeah. So when we did the film, we were like, we have to have that, because that's like a great story, And then the actress, I mean, there's layer upon layer here, but the actress who played the role of that girl was not an actress. She was a woman who worked in an IHOP in Oklahoma City, and the director met her and said, I think, would you mind being in my movie, right? So she's in the movie, and so the movie is shot out of sequence, and so we shot the very last scene in the movie first, and so we were outside this building in Guthrie, actually, in Oklahoma, and so I hung out with her like a lot, and just chatting and whatever, and then the next time she came back was maybe 3 or 4, 5 days later, and it was for the scene in the grand jury, and she was like, she saw me, and she was like. And she said, "Oh God, I have to talk to you." And I said, "What's happening?" She said, "Oh, I've read the script now. This is actually my story." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "I was having an abortion in Houston, And she said, and this is I'm going to make you cry yet. That's my intention here. And she said that the nurse came over and said to her, and they were just alone in the room, and the nurse said, "Oh, I'm going to let you just have a listen to your baby's heartbeat, and then I have to go. I've got a couple of things to do, and then I'll come back. I'll come back and start the procedure. But I'll just go to, and leave you alone, right, with the headphones and her listening to her baby's heartbeat, right? I think we all know where that goes, right?" Yeah. And she said, "Oh, I just put my trousers back on again, and I just got out of there. And I went outside, and her grandfather, she said, was outside, and she said, I don't want to do this. And he said, we're out of here. And then, so I'm like on the set of the movie going, what's just happened here? And I went to Phelim and I said, you won't believe what just happened. And Phelim, very, very smart. My husband, very, very smart. He said, go back right now and ask her, would she do it on camera? Would she tell you that story again? And I went and I said, would you mind? And she said, yeah. And so we went outside the building, and it was quite funny. The first AD and the second AD from the set just followed. They just thought, what's going on here, right? And I could see these two guys, right, in the background as I spoke to her. And I put her on camera, and I said to her, right, for camera, and you guys all get this. I said, don't look directly in the camera, because it's kind of weird. So look at me over here, right. And I went to the side, and I said, and my voice won't be heard, so try and repeat the question, all that stuff. So she starts she tells the story, and she's looking at me, and she says, she says amazing things. And by the way, if we wanted to, we could show that clip. What would you say to girls that are in the same situation as you? What would you say to them?
If you have that opportunity and you decide not to go along with the abortion, don't do it. My son has been so much joy to me, and it's like when I look at him, I just can't believe I was gonna kill somebody so precious. That's a whole generation of me, and I am so thankful to that nurse for giving me the opportunity to change my mind and have my baby. And it's been such a joy. There's days that I just lay in bed and watch him sleep. I'm so happy to have him. So if you have that opportunity, don't kill your baby. Have your baby. It's hard, but have your baby. It'll mean everything to you. Don't kill your baby. Have your baby. Sorry.
We've been around since 1985, and we have people that come in. Just last year, we had this woman come in, and she had a woman with her. She says, my daughter wants to have a pregnancy test. And she said, but her husband's coming for the ultrasound. And I said, okay. And she said, I came here with my daughter. And she said, I was going to abort my daughter. We had this one woman that came in with her daughter, and her daughter had a scholarship for college, and she was going to abort her. So, people coming back to say thank you for saving my baby. And I tell people, I said, I've talked to a lot of people who were considering abortion, and those that ended up having their children, I've never had anybody come and say, well, I'm sorry I did that. That was a mistake. I said, but we have so many people that come in and say, if I could just go back and change that.
I think at this point of our discussion, it's a good time. And I love what you said, because everybody that's watching this obviously has a heart for what you guys are doing, has been supportive, and hopefully there'll be some new supporters that are watching this. And I think it is we talk a lot on an Unashamed podcast about us, forget about the walls of a building or the walls of a cathedral. I mean, we have to live it every single day. And you guys are the front line of pro-life battle. And so therefore, as individual Christians, no matter what our church is doing or not doing, or our higher ups and leaders, we have to be engaged. And we have to decide we're going to be supportive of our time, of our money, because we're up against this. The enemy is just, pouring in the funding to slaughter children. So who's going to stand up for these guys? Who's going to be there? This is the civil rights movement of our generation to stand up and say we're going to do something about that.
I think that right now, and I don't want to get political, but with the new administration, they have designs to liberalize abortion like it's never been liberalized, and you can't even imagine what that would look like. But for one thing is immediately government funding, which is taxpayer funding given to people who provide abortions for people overseas, which is something that Trump did not do. And I believe that, the Equality Act is going to affect all Christians across the board. The churches are going to be affected by that. There's going to come a time when pastors and Christian leaders are going to have to make a decision: do I stand for God or do I not? Because there's going to be some persecution there, because it would be a crime. And that's going to happen to us as well. Pregnancy centers have been attacked throughout the years, but I think that's going to become more and more aggressive. And it's going to get very hard. It's going to get much harder if they... Ultimately, what I think that they would like to do is take away all state rights. And that means that, the states that restrict abortion, because federally abortion is legal in this country to term, and then states restrict it. Well, they would love it if they take all state restrictions away and women have access to abortion at any point of their pregnancy at any time. And that's a slippery slope that goes into infanticide and all kinds of other things. The lack of love has a lot to do with we are desensitized. We don't love our children. And if we don't see value in our children and our unborn children, it's hard to value yourself. You start losing value for other people.
There is a huge chasm between the Supreme Court and the Supreme Being. Big chasm. And if you ever lose that and ever get that mixed up, you're in for hell on earth.
So, Lori, what are you guys looking for in terms of people that are watching this and hopefully have been moved to say we want to help more than we've done before? What do people do to be able to support you guys?
One of the things I put a little tape together, which they watched before this tape, which talked about what's going on. But women come to us for medical services, and one of the things that Planned Parenthood always said was, we see so many people, because we develop relationships with them, they come for all these services and they come back to us. And the truth is, they have the ability to influence the decision of the majority of American women about pregnancy options, and that's just the truth. And because they receive about $1.5 to $1.7 million a day in government funding. Wow! Can you imagine that?
And
that's
your whole budget
funding.
And your whole budget is $1 million.
Yes, and growing. Growing. Yes, but we don't even take government funding, which was provided, and we just says no. We're going to trust God. And God has provided. He's done. But we are doing now is we are seeing women with a variety of medical services. We're doing STI tests for a full panel, and we're treating. We're doing blood and urine. We're doing the tests, the diagnostic ultrasounds, which we've been doing, but we're also doing pelvic exams, microscope testing with treatment.
Sounds
urine
like
analysis.
you actually care about women's health.
We are.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. I like
But the
that.
great thing
Very
is
radical.
Yeah,
Very
that's radical.
when they come through the door and we provide that medical services, we also minister to them. And that's the component that Planned Parenthood doesn't have, other than to really give them carte blanche to be able to go back and have sex and do whatever they want. But we minister to women. We give spiritual, emotional, and practical help, and we share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we have so many, over 100 people come to Christ through the ministry of First Care Women's Clinic every year.
Praise God.
They're desperate for it, and we have better than a lot of mission fields because they're living difficult lives. We have seen people completely transform. So the thing is, as the world grows darker, and I think we're going to have some tough times. I really do. I'm not saying that we can't have a revival and things change, but right now it's going to be a tough time. We're going to go through attacks.
You are correct.
You are.
One thing that I ask is, please pray for us. Pray for us. We're on the front line. We're in a place that Satan hates what we do. And he uses people to just go after us. And so we're constantly fighting that. But I just have to tell you this one story. God prepared us before we even knew this was coming. Years ago, we ran out of space. We were seeing over 500 women a month, and we ran out of space, and we were looking for a larger building, and we get this building that is 10,000 square foot, 2-building complex. Gorgeous. It wasn't at the time. It was a mess, but I looked at it and I said, this is it. This is the building. We went to 2 donors and got that building paid off. Wow. And then we went to another donor, and we got it completely renovated because the ceiling was falling down, the roof was falling down. It turned out that building had been a Planned Parenthood, which was amazing. So the building was redeemed, and it was completely furnished. We have no debt. So then, the vision God gave me was, you're going to be a completely operating medical clinic. You're going to bring these women in. You're going to change hearts. You're going to transform the community. You're going to pull people away from Planned Parenthood. Well, now we have this nurse practitioner, 2 doctors who are supervising physicians. We have certified sonographers. And, they always accuse us of not having qualified people. That's what they accuse pregnancy centers of. We have better qualified. I mean, look what he had. I mean, we have higher than the abortion clinics. And, they say that we don't do enough, and we do all these services for free in a professional, loving, compassionate environment. And it is a beautiful thing. So we also got accredited from the AAAHC, which is Accreditation Association for Ambulatory Healthcare Clinics. And that is like a seal of excellence that you can't argue with. So basically, with everything in place, it's like, we're ready for this attack. But what we're asking from our supporters is to understand that it's not cheap. As you go and you really have a greater impact, it's expensive. Medical is extremely expensive. We're not that little place with doilies and little ducks anymore. We have progressed to a much higher level. And but what do you get? It's life and death. I mean, it literally will save lives. And
you shouldn't be in a situation where you're worried every year about how to pay the bills.
Right.
And I would say to some of the donors out there, here's one thing that has been on my mind a lot about donors. Some of your donors maybe are giving money to the ballet, and they're giving it to the opera and all of that, and it's great and all that, but it's not the priority right now. And people need to really think about that, and particularly because exactly the point. I know exactly the point Phelim wants to make there. Particularly because if they're giving money to the arts in the United States of America, the arts in the United States of America is the arts of death. They're basically celebrating abortion. They are not telling a story. They're not telling a story that is, pro-life in any kind of sense, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So they're celebrating euthanasia. They're celebrating abortion. That's what the arts is now. It's taken over by people like that. Mm-hmm. And so I would say to your donors, and it's disturbing for me sometimes to look at the kind of money that goes to the arts. And I would say to people out there, good people who are supporting you, you need to really step up, because that should not be the thing that you're worried about every morning. It's like, we got this great, you've got this great person working for you that you've just found.
Also,
these people, need to be paid properly. Everyone, because you need to keep the great people there.
No, the people are giving money to Harvard and Yale.
Yeah.
By the way, Harvard doesn't need your money. They've got 40 billion in the bank or something like that.
Yeah.
But also, they're promoting a
Well, I think
culture
for
of
a long-
death. You know,
For a long time, people did picture pregnancy centers with low budgets, and the idea was that people came in because they were upset and they wanted to talk to somebody, and that's just not the case.
Not with what
and
you're
we
doing,
are
yeah.
in an area with that's transient people. It's not the little hometown scenario. We have a short period of time to make a major
huge
impact.
difference.
And so we do classes and mentoring programs. We're working with the men too. We have men that come in and volunteer
Very
and work
important.
with the men, which is
Yeah.
very important. Yeah. But I think that they're beginning to see our donors are extremely, they amaze me. When we got our nurse practitioner, I was talking to a donor about it, and she said, I'll pay for it. And you know what that is. That's a level below the physician. And she paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I will tell you that people do understand this spiritual battle is intensifying.
Yes.
And we need to put all our resources into, his kingdom and kingdom work.
Yeah, it's part of what we do. Dad, bring us home, and then I'd like for you to kind of close out our discussion with a prayer.
Okay.
For First Care, of course, because that's our purpose here, but also just for, our nation and our culture in general.
I was young, and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be blessed. So I just simply say, be generous toward God.
Yes.
And that old adage from the psalmist, he was correct. You never see the righteous. They smile even when most people would say, they look poor. But I've been poor with God and I've been rich with God, and I can live with either one. So we used to sell fish, but now we just looked up one day and I said, boy, God has really poured the blessings out on us. I want everybody out there in computer land to realize there is a slaughterhouse happening right in front of us. It's shameful how we have turned on each other and taken for granted how great life is. Just take it away.
Yeah.
So for all you girls out there who have fallen victim to this particular sin, thank God that the blood of Jesus was shed for your sins, girls.
That's right.
And all the rest of us, we just need to pony up, and we need to present ourselves as one. We have God on our side. We're not going to lose.
Right.
He always wins.
That's right.
So I would just tell everybody out there, be generous toward God, especially in something like this, when this kind of murder and mayhem was going on of the offspring of our country. It's a tragedy.
It is. Offer up that prayer for us, Dan.
Father, I thank you for hearing us today. Father, we believe you made the cosmos, and that you will take this one away at the end of this age and give us a new heavens and a new earth, the home of righteousness. Oh, I long for it, Father, that I could just be with a group of people and our whole world would love you and would love each other. I would just love to see that. So, Father, for the poor, innocent children that have been slaughtered at the hands of godless men, I would just simply say, Father, forgive them, the ones that are guilty of this crime, murdering their own children. Forgive them, Father. You are the great healer. You are the great Savior of the world. You purchased us with your blood. You've given us a great hope to be raised from the dead by your resurrection 3 days after they killed you. Father, your last words, your Son said, was that you would forgive them, for they just didn't know what they were doing. Help us, Father, look into this current problem. This stench of death is all around us. Help us to help the ones who have fallen victim to this. We love you. Thank you for loving us. Help us to love each other, Father. finally love each other. In the name of Jesus, I pray. On behalf of all the little children who have been sacrificed and are with you, amen.
Amen. Thank you for watching this video. And whether you watched it in a living room with a lot of friends or you watched it by yourself on your laptop, I know that it impacted you. It did me. The story of Gosnell had a major impact on me, and I wanted to bring that story to you. So now the question that you have for yourself is, what is your call to action? What is God calling you to do to support the life-saving efforts at First Care Women's Clinic? We didn't do this alone. This growth came from a group of supporters who have supported us over the years financially that allowed us to now be in a 10,000 square foot building, so professional, seeing more women and men because of the medical services we provide and reaching them with the hope of the gospel and the truth of abortion. We have a ways to go. Now is not the time to go on the defensive, but the offensive, to move ahead with confidence that we can really see a transformed community for life. I'm asking you to give. This is a fundraiser, and we need this support. And you probably had an idea of what you were planning to give. And I'm going to ask you to give more than that. I'm also going to ask you to commit to give on a monthly basis, to sustain our day-to-day operation, and to give that one-time gift that will ensure our continued growth. Whatever God calls you to give, I want you to know, on behalf of everyone at First Care Women's Clinic, we're in this together. We need you. And thank you.